Welcome to Mindfulness Lists. The name of the next section is From Descartes' Error to Sartre's Insight. I think those are both French names, so forgive me if I'm not pronouncing them right. There was this philosopher named Descartes, and he thought that he discovered something that was really big, but he was mistaken. What he discovered was he thought, I think, therefore I am. And I think what he meant by that is, since he was always thinking, he identified that as himself. But obviously you can't be your thinking, because there's thinking and then there's awareness of thinking. And obviously the awareness, it comes before the thinking, and your thinking constantly changes. One day you think I'm good, one day you think I'm bad. So which are you? Are you good or bad? Make up your mind. Or are you the awareness that's aware that one day you're thinking that you're good and one day that you're thinking that you're bad? So anyways, this guy thought that he had found who he was, or who everybody was, by the statement, I think, therefore I am. And what he had really found was kind of the root of the ego, basically, thinking. And because that's usually what we identify with, is thoughts. You know, a lot of people identify with thoughts. We've been going over this stuff for a while now. The things we identify with. And I won't repeat it, because I know it's getting old. I know that you know that I know that you know. I'm just kidding. So there was this other philosopher. I think it was 300 years later. Wow. 300 years later, this guy named Jean-Paul Sartre. He looked at Descartes' statement, I think, therefore I am. And in his own words, he said this: the consciousness that says I am is not the consciousness that thinks. So he came up with the statement, but he actually didn't know what it was as well. He wasn't able to articulate it exactly what he was talking about, which is very hard, because you're talking about something that can only be experienced. Awareness, being, spirit, whatever you want to call it. You know what I'm talking about. We've been talking about it for my entire podcast. Awareness is what we're talking about. Mindfulness, whatever you want to call it. Your name here. Put your name right there. So that was his statement. I'll say it once more. The consciousness that says I am is not the consciousness that thinks. And so how Eckhart Tolle explains it, since he's a pretty damn smart guy, I'll use his words. He says, when you are aware that you are thinking, that awareness is not part of thinking. Isn't that awesome? It's just to me, it's such a weight off of my shoulders, just to know that I'm none of these thoughts. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a good person. I'm not a smart person. I'm not a dumb person. I'm the person that is aware of those thoughts. It's kind of strange when you really look at it, when you look at your thoughts. I can't remember what I was thinking yesterday, yet I know that I was in the same mind state of trying to be a mindful person and trying to be an attribute to this world, and that I've been doing that for years and years and years and years and years. Although I can't remember yesterday or the day before exactly how I felt. Yeah, I know it was a nice day. It was my day off. It was a Sunday. I went on a dog walk. But exactly, and the thing about it is, we don't need to remember. The consciousness is just always there. The next book that I'm going to review, it's called A Wise Heart by Jack Kornfield. If you'd ever like some really good stuff to listen to, Jack Kornfield. He is a Buddhist teacher. I think he teaches out in Northern California. He has a retreat up there called Spirit Rock. It's right above San Francisco. And you can find his stuff on YouTube, or there's this other website called Dharma Seed, Dharma, Dharma Seed. What Dharma is, if you don't know, is Dharma are the teachings of Buddhists or of the Buddha. So there's this website called Dharma Seed. Just type in Dharma Seed on a search and it'll come up. And there's all these different Buddhist teachers. I like some of the stuff. Sometimes I like it because it's almost too heady. So maybe if I'm restless and I can't sleep, I'll listen to that stuff. And the thing about Buddhism is it's really old, and subsequently there's a lot of information about it. If you haven't checked it out, it's great to check it out. The thing that doesn't appeal to me about Buddhism is there's so much information. There's a lot of information, and there's a lot of, it's just like, it's similar to other religions or spiritual traditions. There's a lot of information, and there's different lineages. What I've done in my journey is I just take the best parts that work for me. I'm not the smartest person in the world, so I like things that are really simple, because what I find, what happens, like as you go on your journey, you'll hear a lot of great stuff. Eckhart Tolle, Jack Kornfield, they tell these awesome stories that are so inspiring. But what works for me is simple practices like these stories. Say you took some story. Okay, I'll tell you a quick story now. It's story time. Sit down, everybody. Get ready for a story. Maybe you've heard this one before. It's kind of cheesy. So there was a stone cutter, and he just had a really modest life. You know, he had the basic necessities. He had food. He had shelter, a little house, and he had love. He had a good wife. And so he lived in China. This is a Taoist story. He lived in China. And so back in the day in China, whenever the emperor came out, everybody had to come out of their homes and go out in front of their homes and bow to the emperor. So the emperor came by riding in his chariot one day, and him and his wife came out of the house, went and bowed to the emperor. And forgive me if I'm botching up this story. I'm just going to make it a little shorter than usual because it's not bedtime yet, or I would tell you the long version. So he went out and bowed to the emperor, him and his wife, and then he was coming back to his house, and he thought, God, that would be great to be the emperor. And so he made a wish to become the emperor. And he went to sleep that night, and the next morning he woke up and he was the emperor. And he had everything you could ever imagine. He lived in a palace, the finest food, the best music, the best DVD player, the best Nike shoes. I don't think they had Nike shoes back then, but the best Adidas, definitely. The best Airwalks. Everything. He was just living the life. And so he was thinking to himself, yeah, this is pretty good. I think I'll go out on a ride in my what did they have back in the time? In his chariot? No, what are those cars called? Anyways, I'm trying to be Mr. Funny. So he went out in a ride in his chariot. And so he's got this gnarly gold chariot with beautiful horses. And he goes out on a ride through his kingdom. And he's riding, and everybody's coming out of their houses, bowing down to the emperor. And So the weather starts to act up. It starts to rain. Everybody runs in the house and he starts getting wet. So he has to go back to his house. And so he thinks to himself, God, I thought that I was the man, but actually I'm not the man. The storm clouds are the man. And so he made a wish that night. And guess what? He woke up the next day and he was a storm cloud. So, the weather is a very powerful element, wind, eroding rock and water causing floods. And so anyways, he decides to go wreak a little havoc. And so he goes and he's storming on people. People are drowning. He's causing hurricanes. He's causing tidal waves, everything, just gnarly weather. And so he comes up against something and he can't move it. And it's a mountain. And so, again, he makes a wish that night when he goes to sleep and he wakes up and he's a mountain. Now he's at the final frontier. He's Mother Earth. He's everything. And he's like, wow, I should have just saved myself some time and made a wish to become the Earth right away. Wouldn't have had to mess around with being a storm cloud or the emperor. Now I'm the Earth and nothing is more powerful than me. Mother Earth, the end all, the epitome of creation. So he feels something chipping away at him and he looks down the mountain and it's a little stone cutter cutting his stone away. And so what's the point of that story? There is no point of that story. No, the point of that story is sometimes life is a circle and it comes to a point. He was the stone cutter, went through all these things just to maybe want to be a stone cutter again. Have you ever done that? I sure as heck have. I've definitely done that. I've went in a circle so many times, and I guess it just takes time, or hopefully this information is passing through to children and they don't have to go through the hardships. But what Eckhart Tolle says is that this suffering drives us deeper. It really does drive us deeper. And, it's usually through the hardships of our life that real wisdom is gained. There's a saying, you have to lose everything to gain everything. Hopefully not, but I imagine by the time that you're on your deathbed, you'll be pretty damn smart. Enough of that dismal talk. So back to the point. I think, therefore I am. Obviously, you think, and what you think is not you. You're the awareness of your thoughts. And that's exactly what Eckhart Tolle says. I'll repeat it once more in his words. When you are aware that you are thinking, that awareness is not part of thinking. I'll see you next time. Eventually, time is an angel or devil, best friend or worst enemy, great joy, harsh wrath,